Hi, good morning, and welcome to the second session for the unit that we are covering international healthcare policy. Now, in the second learning outcome, what we're looking at doing is we're looking at basically understanding the social and cultural issues in the context of health and social care. So here the basic idea is what we want to understand, that in the context of when we study health and social care, how does the culture and our beliefs actually affect the way we receive treatment, and obviously our whole approach when we look at to the healthcare system. So what we're going to do is go through a few slides to understand first that what is culture and what are different cultural beliefs that we get to see when we look at this particular topic. So we'll look at this from a perspective of few different societies, and obviously try and see how people within different societies actually perceive healthcare, and obviously the treatment that they receive because of healthcare issues. In the second part, what we're going to look at is we're going to try and understand with regards to the task is what impact does culture have when we receive health and social care, or when we look at a particular system in terms of the NHS, for example, and how does the impact of cultural beliefs, different types of people, different types of backgrounds, when they receive care within the NHS or elsewhere in any of the different types of facilities that we look at getting healthcare, we will understand what is the impact the culture has. We'll also relate that to the attitudes in terms of the people's attitude, personal attitude when you try and receive healthcare, and look at understanding it from a point of view of a few examples. We look at the definition of attitude, how is it related to health and social care, and lastly, what we'll look at is we'll try and evaluate what we've studied today in terms of the overall impact of culture, our beliefs, and how does it structure the system and affects the system in terms of one from the side of people who are actually administrating care or giving care to the patients, and the other side being the patients receiving the care. So what we look at is relate both the beliefs, the impact of culture, and the attitude of people receiving healthcare to understand how this whole thing works within the context of a particular system, and for example the NHS. So let me start off with these slides just to go through some of the theoretical concepts first, and the idea here would be to understand a few points generally speaking to relate it into the context of understanding what is culture and what are cultural beliefs. So when we look at the context of culture, one of the key things that we understand is that all cultures have a system, and this system essentially has some beliefs, and obviously these beliefs then affect or let's put it this way, they basically form a process through which we receive care. Now, culture obviously is seen as one of the important determining factors, when we look at how do we receive health and social care. So it leads to the rise of preferences and practices. Now, this can be looked at from a point in terms of how patients typically perceive the treatment or the type of treatment that they're receiving. And to a certain extent, this actually depends on the type of education that they've had, and in terms of what their belief has been, what their background has been, and where they come from in terms of demographics and, in terms of, background. So sometimes you get to see that a case in point here would be that if you've had, say, for example, a problem, and you're then referred by your GP or, for example, your local surgery to go into the hospital to receive a care or maybe get some sort of an operative procedure done. To a certain extent, some of these things are, influenced by the cultural background, the beliefs that we have, the background we come from, and, obviously patients' willingness to be able to cooperate to receive that treatment. Now, what we do get to see, if we try and understand these beliefs from a different societal point of view, when we look at Western industrialized nations, say, for example, the UK, we see that, our perception of diseases is that it's a natural phenomena which basically occurs because of certain set of events which happen. And in order to get well or get back onto our feet, what we need to be able to do is basically get medical treatment, which will help us combat the problem that we are facing. And this is done in conjunction with the use of technology, the medicines, and obviously diagnosis, which is done through the initial set of process that you go through, wherein then at some stage you are given appropriate medicine or treatment, and there is use of technology in understanding how this is going to be then treated. Now, if we look at other cultures, culture plays definitely an important issue in terms of patient compliance. So when I say patient compliance, sometimes you get to see that some patients, when they have to undergo treatment, they need to look at getting advice or maybe getting some sort of counseling because their beliefs or their background does not permit them to be receiving that treatment. So let's look at some of the other examples in terms of how other societies kind of perceive the impact of culture on their healthcare beliefs. So when we look at illness, or you look at some sort of a problem that you've had, and this in some societies is a result of what they call supernatural phenomena. That means superstitions. So sometimes when you look at some societies, they will primarily look at the issue of illness from a point of view of a supernatural phenomenon, which means that they will primarily pray or look at those kind of spiritual interventions, which will then obviously, according to them, do away with these unnatural forces, and the person would get cured. Now, one of the studies which was apparently carried out in the Asian context, primarily in Cambodia, and this was published in one of the American journals in 2015, related to culture and the effects of our health, culture on the health beliefs in terms of society. It basically came out with that, in that particular society, which has very minimal formal education, adults there make a considerable effort to comply with therapy. If they are diagnosed with any problem, for example, or any illness, then adults there would make considerable efforts to be able to comply with the treatment that they are being administered. And this lies to a certain extent in terms of taking medicines to make sure that they are able to recover from that. Now, when we look at extending this to a larger section of the society, what we do sometimes see is that, sorry about that, what we do sometimes see is that from this context, sometimes the extended family of the patient has a significant influence. Sometimes you see that the oldest members in the family would also have a significant influence in terms of making a decision or being a spokesperson if they feel that somebody has had a bit of a problem or an healthcare issue in their family. Now, this sometimes can also be related to the interest and honor of a family when we look at certain Asian cultures, and they prohibit the use of treatments because they see it as a part of supernatural phenomena, or in some Asian cultures, what they say is it is to do with more of maintaining harmony with the nature, and that's why there's this very strong emphasis on avoiding conflicts or direct confrontation in terms of taking medical treatments. Now, this if we look at extending it to other societies, we will see sometimes you see Chinese patients because of the individual behavior, and the way they, the background they come from, say in terms of family ties. Sometimes what they see is that mental illness or any such behavior, could be seen as lack of control, which may produce shame and guilt, on the family. So certain problems which are related to, for example, the aging population in China, when you look at dementia and some of the other problems, families shy away from taking, medical help or going into the healthcare professional, going into some sort of taking help is a factor which is related to their cultural beliefs, that it shows that you are not able to exercise enough control, enough self-control, and this is seen as a shame of, as a cause of shame and guilt within the families. So as a result, Chinese patient may be reluctant to take, medicine or, treatment, and what they will tend to do is basically look at the process of, going through some therapy, or, local medicine, which has been passed on by generations to try and see if that treatment works. Now, in some cases, if you look at cultures from India and Pakistan or Southeast Asia, they are also cultures which are, they believe in the supernatural phenomenon, obviously superstitions, and they're reluctant to accept diagnosis sometimes of severe emotional illnesses or mental retardation. And this is primarily, again, due to the fact that this is related to cultural beliefs. Now, we can go through some of the other examples, but here the idea would be to try and understand how, in particular, when we look at, the culture of a particular society actually has an impact on the type of treatment or the healthcare that they receive. And similarly, when we look at, Far East Asian or cultures, you look at Vietnamese culture in particular, they have a particular mystical belief which explains physical and mental illnesses. And as a result, what they tend to do is they basically believe that the body is governed by hot and cold poles, and they look at, treating some of these illnesses, not through the Western style, looking at treatment, but they look at some sort of interventions through, their own created medicines or drugs, which is primarily, nature related. If we look at, some of the beliefs within the Russian side of things, when you look at that as a country, here the patients find it difficult to question a physician. They normally look at discussing, medical concerns or issues directly with, their concerned person, could be GP, pharmacy, nurses. And here the patients actually expect a paternalistic approach. That means patients look up to the doctors and look up to the medical staff, the healthcare professionals, to be able to provide competent healthcare, which will help them recover as soon as possible. So the reliance on physician expertise, is to a certain extent, built into their cultural beliefs. Now, having understood some idea and getting some idea in terms of, what types of cultural beliefs we get to see when we look at different societies, what we want to be able to do now is to try and assess the impact of culture on healthcare. So let's look at a few slides to understand this particular task and, how this can be related to having an impact, on society. The first part we looked at impact of culture. Now we're looking at an impact of society. So when you look at an example here, many African Americans, they participate in culture that centers on the importance of family and church. So sometimes you get to see very close-knit communities which are closely bound, and there, they have very strong values, which are placed on the importance of family and obviously looking at, the church. Now, in this case, what we do get to see is that sometimes they have extended kinships or bonds with their uncles and aunts and individuals, and they don't tend to be kind of biologically related, but they still place a very strong emphasis on the family system. Now here, normally what we will see is that from a societal point of view, a key family member is always consulted on important healthcare decisions. So when we look at some societies like the Native Americans, we look at the Jewish society, when we look at, they will basically have a key member in the family which will always be consulted for important healthcare related decisions. And sometimes we do get to see this having a bit of a rub off on the different ethnic groups when we look at within the United Kingdom, and some of these ethnic groups or ethnic minorities have their own perspective and values on how the healthcare system should work. And in some cases, what they have is they have their own beliefs, and because they have their own beliefs, they to a certain extent have their own practices because of the background they come from, or if they've immigrated from outside to the UK. And what we do get to see that because of the culture, the background, and their previous let's put it this way, demographics, their healthcare practices tend to differ from those which are generally seen within the UK healthcare system. Now here, sometimes you will see that there is a bit of a conflict which tends to happen because they have a different expectation from a healthcare professional, or maybe a nurse or a GP or a pharmacist, whichever you see. And in those cases, what they tend to do is they basically have then expectations which sometimes are creating barriers, let's put it this way, because of the differences, and these differences could be because of language, education, background, their ability to be able to understand the medical problem or the issue, and this then tends to have an overall impact on how they receive healthcare within the society. Now, cultural differences can also be looking at, affecting patients' attitude. And let's look at understanding this from a few, slides from a theoretical point of view, is because what we want to understand is how does a person's attitude affect the ability to be, administered health and social care. So, for example, if you're in need for medical supervision, how does your attitude actually affect the treatment that you receive? So here, what we are talking about is essentially the ability to be able to understand and manage and cope with the illness that you have been diagnosed with, and then the subsequent medical treatment that the patient actually receives. Now, here, sometimes we do get to see that patients and families, they bring certain specific cultural issues, which could be related to both health of the individual, the illness, or the symptoms being reported, and in some cases, the care being administered or delivered. So in the case of Asian families, if you look at, most of these sexually related problems, you will see that are not discussed. And in this is that if you have some sort of these problems, then the women generally shy away from discussing these problems, and they are normally discussed either in the presence of a male member or a male, let's put it this way, a senior member or a key figure of the family when these problems are discussed, because they are seen to be problems which are not openly discussed, from their point of view. So here the attitudes in terms of, understanding the illness or the reasons why this has happened typically affects, the kind of treatment they receive, from a point of view of, from a point of view of the which is required to be given. So on this particular table, what I want to basically show is that sometimes you will see that lots of different there's sort of different questions which need to be asked by the healthcare professional to be able to deal effectively with the varying cultures and the beliefs and also the attitude of the person towards the problem being faced. So some of the questions that most health professionals sometimes tend to ask is about things that they are given to understand when they do training and development, to understand what are the various cultural traditions that they would need to be aware of. So for example, when we look at our increasing diverse society within the UK, what we do tend to see a lot of healthcare professionals working within this sector are continuously asked to upgrade their skills, knowledge, and also given training to understand the cultural traditions of the patients that they work with, and they are then kind of trained to be able to play or have close attention towards the body language, the kind of response, the expression or anxiety, or the kind of signals which the patient or the family member would actually give when they are being administered the treatment. In some cases, it is expected that you ask open-ended questions to gain more information about their assumptions and obviously their expectations from receiving the treatment. And sometimes we do get to see that some of these patients, because of their attitude and beliefs, they need to get consultation even prior to receiving a treatment, because sometimes some of these beliefs do hinder with the illness or the treatment being received for the illness, and in that case consultation is required to kind of get them comfortable and really get going or talking to understand why this treatment is being done. So some of these things could be looked at from a point of view of the attitude. We look at healthcare and healthcare issues. So if I look at the basic definition now, according to a few studies which have been done, the term attitude is widely used primarily within the healthcare sector, because when we look at ethnic minorities, we look at diverse cultures, and obviously, NHS catering to a different set or diverse set of people when we provide these services, they need to understand that what is the general expectation which people have, or the opinion they form when they speak to different people, they see or read a material, or they understand their, in terms of their understanding of issues. So when we look at attitude, it is primarily a mixed reaction, which could be positive or negative, to a person, object, or an idea. And this attitude can also be lasting because it tends to stay over a period of time. So once you form the attitude towards a particular attitude towards a system, a treatment, or if your ideas become kind of concretized, what it makes it difficult to kind of change that, and it requires time for that to be changed. So some of these things, when we look at the role of attitude in particular, and the studies related to that in the context of healthcare were actually done by a psychologist, Daniel Katz, and this was under his functional theory of attitudes, which basically facilitated social behavior, and he constructed this particular study wherein he talked about how the social behavior influenced the development of attitude towards health and social care. And he looked at a few ideas, which were things like the importance of values and beliefs within a culture, how they were defended, or how important they were and ingrained within that particular culture or society, and what was the role in terms of knowledge and information, which help them to understand and administer some of healthcare practices. Now, I have put in a few slides which basically talk about describing this particular study, and the utilitarian function, which also describes the basic principles of beneficence and punishment. It's a general theory which obviously has been picked up from management, wherein this particular study by Daniel Katz was very specific to health and social care and the behavior, social behavior aspect of. Going further, what we look at is we kind of divide some of these things into the 3 or 4 that he used to kind of construct this particular study. So from that point of view, I think it is important for us to understand the concept and how and what role an attitude plays in terms of when we look at the administration or administering health and social care to people within society which have different beliefs, culture, and background. There are other theories which are also there, and one of the key theories that we need to look at is the ABC model, of attitude theories in general, and this basically consists of 3 components which talked about affect, behavior, and cognition. And here, it is also trying to understand how the behavior of an individual, when divided into 3 different components, affects or molds the attitude, of the individual receiving, healthcare in general, or in general the attitude of the person with regards to a particular situation, or basically with regards to a situation. So there are a few models. There's another one which is Fishbein model, which basically talks about multi-attributes relate to health and social care. And then here, the idea is, when you do this particular task, when we talk about analyze attitudes to healthcare, I think you will have to make a reference to one of the theories covered in the slides, for which I will also give you a handout to detail it out, so that you are able to put this in the context of a theoretical aspect, but at the same point in time, explain it and relate it to your healthcare context, with regards to the unit that we are studying. Now, looking at very briefly a few points, there is obviously a growing realization that, when we look at a lot of people coming into the UK, which are immigrants, and they are being asked to, become mainstream or adopt, the culture within the UK, what we do get to see is, because of the different groups, and different diverse cultures which are now prevalent within the NHS, within the UK, to which NHS actually caters, what we do see that is many healthcare professionals, have to be culturally sensitive to provide, appropriate services. And sometimes you will see that it becomes very difficult for the people not having the relevant background, to be able to administer, the patient care which is required, in order to get that, treatment administered to the particular patient. So here there is a study which was by NHS, and in that particular study which was carried out, the Quality Care Commission in 2015 published a report wherein they spoke about the background in terms of delivering high quality care, with keeping in mind the common commitments which need to be made to patients, so that we are able to, kind of be sensitive, but also able to incorporate the diverse backgrounds, the culture and the beliefs and the attitudes while administering this particular care. So the British healthcare system is obviously not alone in experiencing these problems, but this is something that we have also seen, which other healthcare systems or, similar systems like in Australia, Canada, and the US, they also have, these things which have now been incorporated because of, global mobility, economic migration, and obviously a lot of people, now going into countries wherein it is now a multicultural or a diverse setting wherein individuals have, the country or the particular geography has individuals from different culture, background, and, with different beliefs and attitude. Now, this particular study, which was done in 2015, particularly about of, understanding how attitude can affect, a person receiving the treatment. And from that point of view, a few set of questions were determined, primarily which healthcare professionals need to be aware of, so that when they ask these open-ended questions, the idea is to do a bit of cultural assessment. And some of these questions are on the slide. So, for example, they are, open-ended, and they are asked to patients so that you are able to get more information about the patient and how to administer that particular treatment, keeping in mind their beliefs, and where they come from. Now, by asking these questions, sometimes what you're doing is basically getting valuable information about the patient, and that would help you effectively live or after, a particular treatment, as the case may be. Now, what we look at in the subsequent slide is to try and understand how attitude culture can be all put together into one context, and then we understand how this works from a national context. Now, again, this is a study with your handout on, and this study, was basically, conducted by NHS and the Curve of Care Parameter published by King's College London in 2015. And what I've done is, from the study, I have kind of extracted out a few relevant pages, which I think would be important enough for us to go through to try and understand this particular concept of, culture, belief, and its impact, on administering care. So this particular handout, which I'm going to send you, is about 13 odd pages, but it talks why this study was done, how it looks at the inception of culture into, the NHS, National Healthcare Service as a system, what are the advantages and benefits. And then in the second chapter, which is implemented to our task to we talk about, the culture and how this is using the various bodies like the, National Institute of, Research, the NHS, and in terms how is then being implemented into various trusts and hospitals, so that it is great enough to, basically deliver and administer healthcare related service to patients which are coming across from diverse backgrounds. And obviously, one of the key things which is kept in mind is patient satisfaction, and this is done in regards with a study which has also been carried out by Ipsos Mori and the GP, British Medical Association, and the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, to try and ensure that whatever care is provided to the patient is going to take into account the culture of the organization, the culture of compassion, and obviously ensuring that the provision of healthcare and its delivery is recognizing the various backgrounds, the beliefs, and the instilling the culture of care from a point of view of administering that to the patient. So this is where I would probably stop for today, and send you a copy of this presentation, which is also, and also this particular handout you're getting to see, which basically talks about and does a bit to give you understand the importance of social and cultural aspects when we